Good morning. We're going to be talking about ecology of organisms. We have three objectives that we're going to try to get through in today's lecture, comparing abiotic factors and biotic factors. We're going to try to list two examples of each. We're going to describe two mechanisms that will allow organisms to survive in a changing environment. And then we're going to explain the concept of Now, for the most part, as far as the ecology of organisms is concerned, we're going to make sure that we describe a habitat first. So we need to make sure that we understand this is a place where an organism lives. So a good example of that would be Habitat for Humanity. That's creating a place for an organism to, or in this case, a human being to live. Okay, so why it lives in a particular area depends on three things: evolutionary history. So, does it swim? Does it walk on land? Does it breathe oxygen? What does it do? So evolutionary history is, what does it do? So what is its abilities? Can it jump high? Can it swim? Can it run fast? Those types of things will determine why it lives in a particular area. And then its needs, of course, does it need a lot of sunlight? So does it need to be in an area where there's a lot of sun? Can it survive underground? Does it need to eat a particular type of leaf? Does it need to live in a shallow sea? Those types of things. All of those are needs as far as what it needs to eat, where it needs to fit, where is it going to be safe. Those are all needs. So the next thing we need to discuss then is within that habitat there are going to be biotic and abiotic factors. Now, both biotic or living, biotic means living, and abiotic or non-living factors will influence an organism. So good examples of abiotic factors are things like the climate, sunlight, pH. So we talk about how much hydroxide is in a particular solution, or how many hydrogen ions are in there. So when we talk about that, it changes your pH scale. The salinity, how much salt is in the water. Oxygen concentration is important. The availability of nitrogen is so important for plants and their ability to create proteins. And precipitation. Certain organisms can't survive in areas where there's not enough water. So we have to make sure that we're aware of that. Okay, so in order for organisms to survive in a particular environment, we have two ways in which they can do this. The first one that they can survive, or at least help themselves out, I guess, would be to acclimate. So some organisms can adjust their tolerance, what they can survive in, to abiotic factors through the process of acclimation. Now, for humans, acclimation can be thickening of the blood when it gets cold, or the understanding that we need to put a coat on. That's acclimation to this particular environment. Other mammals do a good job of growing longer fur, and of course doing things that will, at the end of the day, make them warmer in a colder environment. And that cold, that temperature change is part of the climate, and so that is an abiotic factor. Okay, other organisms do a good job of increased sunlight. Will actually have hairs on their particularly plants or whatnot, have hairs over their cells to actually reduce the amount of sunlight coming in so that they don't get overwhelmed. So all that is a acclimation process. Okay, so that's kind of the first way. So we can acclimate ourselves to where we're at. If it gets hot, we can always lose layers, or we can sweat. Those types of things. Remember, acclimatization happens when we have this. Acclimation happens when that can happen in our lifetime. Adaptation is something that occurs in a population over a long period of time. Okay, so the other way that organisms can change what they can do in their tolerance is to control their internal conditions. So this could be changing, like I was saying before, changing the thickness of your blood, changing the pH level, those types of things, changing how warm you are inside of you. Those are internal temperatures are very important. Now, within that, we have two different layers of, or two different categories of organisms that can change their internal conditions. The first one is called a conformer. These are organisms that do not regulate their internal conditions, and they change as their internal or their external environment changes. So in this case, what they're doing is basically reptiles or amphibians that have to be in warmer areas to keep themselves warm, okay, or else they can't function. Regulators are organisms that can control their own. So birds and humans do a very good job of controlling their own internal conditions. We can maintain our internal temperature. Okay. What we can also do is escape from unsuitable conditions. So in this case, some species can survive in unfavorable conditions, and some can't. So they do one of two things. First of all, they can go into dormancy. This is a long-term strategy to enter a state of reduced activity. So you talk about desert species that will be much more nocturnal than they are diurnal, so they don't go out during the day. They're more active at night when it's cooler. Okay, so they kind of go into dormancy during the day to maintain water. Okay, that'd be a really good example. Migration. These are things like we saw in the video. We talked about caribou moving across Canada, birds flying from South, Central America all the way up into their breeding grounds up in near the Arctic Circle. Those are examples of migration. So they're moving to more favorable habitats when they can. Okay. And the last thing we need to talk about is the niche. Now, the niche is a way of life or a role that an ecosystem plays, or an organism plays in an ecosystem. So the range of conditions that can be tolerated, the resources it uses, the methods of obtaining resources, number of offspring it has, the time of reproduction, and any interactions with its environment are important to the niche. So those are the 6 things that are important to an organism's niche. Now, an example of that is the earthworm will always live most of its life underground. It's responsible for taking organic matter and moving it around and aerating it, so it has a very specific role. And of course, in a food chain, it will actually be food for a bird. So we have 2 different types of niches. There is a generalist niche, which can tolerate a wide range of conditions and use a variety of resources. Example of this would be a Virginia possum. So it can be found in many different areas across the United States. It can eat lots of different things. So it's a generalist niche. It can tolerate wide ranges of things. The other side of that is the specialist niche, which can tolerate only a narrow window of conditions and use only a few specific resources. So like the koala of Australia can only eat eucalyptus leaves, and it's only found in Australia in the natural, in the wild. Okay, pandas are the same way. Pandas are only found in China. They only eat bamboo, so they're very narrow niched organisms. And so we have this niche that you fit into in your environment. That is everything that you do. Everything that you do is fitting into that niche. Now, it's different. The habitat itself is where you live. Okay, so a habitat actually fits into an organism's niche. Okay, whereas a niche is everything from when it reproduces, what it eats, how it obtains it, where it lives, how long it lives. Those are all of its niche. Where it fits in a food chain, that's all part of the niche. Okay, all right. Thank you very much.